A struggling street food vendor sacrifices her only meal for a silent homeless man every night for 30 days, never knowing that on the 31st day, a black Escalade would reveal a truth powerful enough to change her destiny forever. The city never truly slept. Even after sunset, the corner of Maple and 3rd Street buzzed with tired footsteps, passing cars, and the distant hum of neon lights. And right there, beneath a flickering street lamp, Afia unfolded her small wooden table, just like she did every single day. She wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. She didn't even own the corner she worked on. But what she did have was a single burner stove, a worn cooking pot, and hands that knew how to turn simple ingredients into something warm enough to comfort a stranger. From late afternoon until the sky turned dark blue, Afia cooked. Rice steamed. Stew simmered. The smell of spices drifted down the sidewalk, pulling in office workers, taxi drivers, and construction men heading home. They lined up, paid what they could, thanked her politely, and disappeared back into their lives. When the rush finally slowed, Afia would count the small stack of bills in her apron pocket. Most nights, it was just enough to buy tomorrow's groceries and keep the lights on in her tiny apartment. And every single night, she saved one last plate. One plate for herself. She would carefully spoon rice onto it, pour the thick tomato stew over the top, and set it aside while she packed up. That final plate wasn't luxury, it was survival. It was the quiet reward at the end of a long day. But that night was different. As she wiped down her table, she felt something, a gaze. Across the street, sitting quietly on the curb, was a man she had never seen before. His clothes were worn, his shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes tired but alert. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't calling out. He was simply watching. Watching her food. Watching that last plate. Afia looked down at her dinner. Then back at him. Her stomach tightened. She had eaten nothing since morning. The scent of her own cooking made her dizzy. I need this plate, she thought. If I give this away, what will I eat? The man quickly looked away, as if ashamed to be caught staring. Afia hesitated. What was she supposed to do? Walk past him pretending she hadn't noticed? Eat while he sat there with empty hands? She picked up the plate. Her steps felt heavier than usual as she crossed the street. The night air was cooler there, quieter. She stopped a few feet from him and held the plate out gently. This is fresh, she said softly. Please, take it. The man looked up, surprised. For a moment, he didn't speak. His eyes were filled with something deeper than hunger, something like disbelief. Thank you, he whispered. Afia nodded, unable to say more. She turned and walked back to her table, her stomach empty but her heart strangely full. As she packed the last of her things, she didn't see the way the man watched her now, not with hunger, but with quiet respect. That night, Afia went to bed hungry. But sometimes, the plate you give away becomes the blessing that returns. The next evening, he was there again. Same curb. Same quiet posture. Same watchful eyes. Afia noticed him the moment she unfolded her table. The city was loud as always. Car horns, chatter, hurried footsteps. But around him there seemed to be a strange stillness. He did not stretch out a hand. He did not hold up a sign. He simply sat and observed. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than begging ever could. As she stirred the stew, Afia found herself glancing at him between customers. His clothes were worn, yes. His shoes had clearly seen too many seasons. But his posture was straight. His gaze steady. There was something alert in his expression, something thoughtful. He did not look defeated. He looked aware. He doesn't look like he belongs on the street, she thought quietly. When the dinner rush slowed, Afia wiped her hands on her apron and took a moment to truly study him. He wasn't staring at her anymore. Instead, he seemed to be studying the people around him, the way they walked, the way they spoke, the way they carried themselves. Who was he before this curb became his home? The question lingered in her heart. That night, just like before, only one plate remained. Her plate. The rice was still warm. The steam rose gently into the cool air. Her stomach tightened again with hunger, but her eyes drifted toward the curb. He noticed. Their gazes met for a brief second. There was no demand in his eyes.
No expectation.
Only quiet dignity. Afia took a slow breath, picked up the plate, and walked toward him. I made extra, she said softly, though they both knew that wasn't true. He looked at the food, then at her face, as if searching for hesitation. Finding none, he accepted it carefully, almost respectfully. Thank you, he said again, his voice calm and deep. Not rushed. Not desperate. Grateful. She sat on the edge of the sidewalk a few feet away while he ate. He didn't devour it. He ate slowly, thoughtfully, like someone who understood the value of each bite. And in that quiet moment, Afia felt something shift inside her. Kindness wasn't loud. It didn't need applause. It simply existed between two people who understood struggle. As he finished, he gave a small nod, almost formal. I won't forget this, he said. Afia smiled gently. It's just food. But as she walked back to her table, something in her heart whispered otherwise. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest destinies. The third night became the fourth. The fourth became the seventh. And before Afia realized it, kindness had quietly turned into a routine. Every evening, the silent man returned to the same curb. He never arrived early. He never demanded attention. He simply appeared as the sun dipped low and the streetlights began to glow. And every evening, Afia cooked. The rhythm of her days remained the same: serve customers, collect small payments, smile through exhaustion. But now there was something unspoken waiting at the end of each night. One final plate. Her plate. She would prepare it carefully, just as she always had. Steam rising. Rice soft and warm. The scent of spices wrapping around her like comfort. And every time, her body reminded her how hungry she was. But still, she carried it across the street. At home, when her sister asked if she had eaten, Afia would nod and say, "Yes, I'm full." Then she would drink water before bed, hoping it would quiet the ache in her stomach. It's only one meal, she would tell herself. I can manage. But 30 days is not just one meal. As the days passed, the silence between them slowly softened. The man began to speak a little more. Not about his past in detail, but in fragments. He mentioned a daughter he had not seen in years. He spoke about discipline, about business, about how people often judge too quickly. His words were thoughtful. Measured. Afia found herself listening carefully. One night, as he finished eating, he asked her, "Why do you do this?" She hesitated. Because she knew hunger? Because she understood what it meant to be invisible? Because she believed no one should end their day feeling forgotten? Because I can, she answered simply. He studied her face as if that answer meant more than she realized. Some evenings they spoke about family values. Other nights, they shared quiet moments of understanding without many words. Afia told him about losing her mother when she was young. He nodded, eyes distant, as if grief was a language he also understood. What makes two strangers trust each other without proof? By the 20th day, he no longer looked like just a homeless man to her. He looked like someone carrying a hidden story. Someone who had once stood tall in a different world. By the 30th day, giving him the last plate no longer felt like sacrifice. It felt like purpose. That night, as he finished his meal, he looked at her longer than usual. Tomorrow, he said quietly, will be different. Afia smiled politely, not thinking much of it. She had no idea how true those words were. Because sometimes, the smallest sacrifices are quietly building the biggest miracles. When the city lights faded and the streets grew quiet, Afia's real battle began at home. Her apartment was small, 2 rooms, peeling paint, and a window that refused to close properly in winter. In the corner of the main room sat her father's bed. Once a strong man who carried sacks of grain on his shoulders, he now struggled to sit up without coughing. Illness had taken his strength slowly. Doctor visits had taken their savings even faster. Each night, Afia would step inside with a gentle smile, placing her apron by the door so he wouldn't see how worn it had become. She would kneel beside him, adjust his blanket, and ask about his day as if everything in their lives was stable. "Did you eat?" he would ask her, his voice thin but firm. "Yes, Baba. I ate at the stall," she would reply softly. He would nod, satisfied. But she hadn't. She would boil water in the kitchen, letting the steam fill the room so it sounded like cooking. She would clink a spoon against a cup to create the illusion of a meal. "He has already lost his health. I won't let him lose his pride too," she would think as she sipped warm water instead of food. The medical bills were stacked neatly in a drawer she kept hidden. Rent was already a week late. And recently, the landlord had begun appearing more often, standing downstairs with folded arms, watching her leave each morning. His eyes carried questions she did not want to answer. "You're behind again," he said one afternoon as she returned from buying vegetables. His tone was not cruel, but it was not kind either. "I can't wait forever." Afia lowered her gaze respectfully. "I just need a little more time." Time. It was the one thing she never seemed to have enough of. Between hospital trips, long hours at the food stall, and pretending strength for her father, her shoulders carried a weight no one else could see. And still, every evening, she gave away her last plate. Was she being foolish, or faithful? The pressure tightened around her like invisible chains. There were nights when she stood at her stall after closing, staring at the empty pot, wondering how much longer she could keep holding everything together. But when she looked across the street and saw the silent man waiting quietly, something inside her refused to change. Because if she let go of kindness, what would she have left? Back in the apartment, she would sit beside her father until he fell asleep, listening to his uneven breathing. The room would grow dark, heavy with worry. Outside, the landlord's shadow lingered longer each day. Afia closed her eyes and whispered a small prayer, not for wealth, not for miracles, but simply for strength. Because sometimes, the heaviest burdens are carried by the quietest hearts. The morning air smelled of asphalt and urgency. Afia arrived at her usual corner, folding her stall with practiced motions, only to find Victor standing there, arms crossed and eyes cold. "You know the city has been clear about permits," he said, his voice sharp. "I can't let you operate without proper licensing. You have 7 days. After that, it's over." Afia froze, the words sinking like stones in her stomach. 7 days. Just 7 days to scrape together what she didn't have. Licensing fees, inspections, city paperwork, each a mountain she could not climb alone. "How am I supposed to survive this?" she thought, a tight knot forming in her chest. Victor continued, oblivious to her fear. "I've been lenient. But the law doesn't wait, and neither do I. Clean up or pack up." He turned and walked away, leaving only the echo of his boots against the concrete. Afia's hands trembled as she set up her stove. The usual rhythm of her morning, preparing the dough, chopping vegetables, seasoning the meat, felt heavier, each task demanding more energy than she had to give. Her father's health, the rent, the silent man she fed every day, all of it collided into one crushing thought: what if she failed? Fear wrapped around her like a thick fog. Every coin in her pocket seemed insufficient. She counted them again, then again, until her fingers ached. 7 days. That was all she had. She looked across the street and saw him, the quiet man waiting, his eyes calm, watching her with the same patience as always. Even in her panic, she felt a stab of guilt. She had been giving away her last plate every day, and now she might not even be able to cook one for herself, let alone feed him. "I can't let everything fall apart." "I won't," she thought, though the words sounded hollow against the weight pressing on her shoulders. As the day wore on, Afia moved mechanically, serving customers with a smile she did not feel. Every plate she handed out felt like a borrowed piece of hope, one she wasn't sure she could sustain. The clock ticked, marking the countdown to the day her world could collapse entirely. Even at night, sleep evaded her. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the bills, the permit notices, the empty spaces where coins should be. Fear whispered in every shadow, every creak of the apartment floor. Could she really hold on? Could she survive long enough to see another chance? And yet, beneath the fear, a tiny ember of determination remained. She would not surrender, not today, not tomorrow, not within the 7 days Victor had given. Because when the walls close in and the future looks uncertain, the courage to persist becomes the only lifeline. Sometimes the hardest deadlines reveal the deepest strength. The morning sun fell in golden streaks across the cracked pavement as Afia prepared for what she knew could be her last day. Her hands moved almost automatically, folding napkins and arranging steaming plates, but her heart pounded in a rhythm of dread. Across the street, a city inspector approached, clipboard in hand, ready to shutter her stand. "This is it. Everything I've worked for, gone?" The inspector cleared his throat, authority in every step. "Miss, I'm here to close this stand. You've had your chance to comply with city permits. The law is clear. Afia swallowed hard, the weight of 31 days of silent sacrifice pressing down on her chest. Her eyes flicked toward the curb, searching for the familiar figure she had fed every day. But instead of the usual quiet, ragged form, a sleek black Escalade rolled smoothly to a stop. Time seemed to slow. The engine's purr filled the air, blending with the distant city hum. Afia blinked, disbelief tightening her throat. The homeless man, her silent companion through 30 long days, stepped from the vehicle. He stood straight, tall, immaculate. His worn coat had vanished, replaced with a tailored suit that gleamed under the sunlight. Who is he? She whispered to herself, unable to move. The city inspector's eyes widened, and even Victor, her greedy landlord, froze mid-step. The man reached into his pocket and handed her an envelope, thick with documents. Afia, he said, his voice calm but commanding, I just purchased this entire building. Your stand is safe. You can keep serving, and you'll never worry about rent again. Afia's knees went weak. Tears blurred her vision as the reality sank in. 30 days of giving her last plate, of selfless determination, had led to this miraculous moment. The man smiled gently, a quiet reassurance in his eyes. I've been watching your heart, he said simply, and it was time to help. She stood frozen, clutching the envelope as emotions surged, relief, astonishment, gratitude. Her small act of kindness had revealed a hidden truth. Sometimes the people who seem smallest hold the greatest power. The inspector stepped back, nodding awkwardly, while Victor's greedy expression melted into reluctant awe. Afia finally exhaled, letting the tension of a month-long fear roll away. Could one simple act of compassion truly change everything? She wondered, heart pound. With disbelief and joy. In that moment, Afia understood a truth that no law, no rent notice, no hardship could ever erase. Generosity, even when unnoticed, has the power to transform lives, sometimes in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. True kindness never goes unseen. The black Escalade's engine purred softly in the background as Afia followed Solomon toward a quiet corner of the sidewalk, away from the curious onlookers. His eyes, calm and steady, met hers with a depth that made her catch her breath. For 30 days he had been silent, watching, listening, absorbing every small act of her kindness. But now the mask was gone, and the truth could no longer hide. I know this may be hard to believe, Solomon began, his voice low but warm. I wasn't always on the streets. Once I had everything, a family, trust, fortune, and then it all fell apart. He paused, as if weighing the right words. Betrayal, greed, people who smiled while stabbing you in the back. I left it all. I wanted to see if there was still real goodness left in the world. That's why I became invisible. Afia's hands trembled slightly. Her mind raced, trying to process the life behind the man she had only seen through ragged clothes and tired eyes. Could one person suffering really hide so much power and pain? Solomon smiled faintly, almost sheepishly. And then you came along. Day after day, offering what little you had, your last plate, your heart, your belief in others. You restored something in me I thought was lost forever, faith in humanity. Afia's throat tightened. She had spent those 30 days worrying about her father, her finances, the judgment of strangers, and yet here was the proof that even small, quiet acts could ripple out in ways she never imagined. Her gaze softened as she reached out, almost afraid to touch the man who had carried so much behind his silence. You didn't just feed me, Solomon continued, voice rich with emotion. You reminded me that goodness exists, that someone can give without expecting anything in return. That is worth more than any fortune. Her heart swelled, tears brimming, as she tried to find the words. How could she ever explain the full weight of her emotions? Relief, wonder, disbelief, gratitude, it all collided at once. Is this really real, or am I dreaming? She thought, blinking back tears. Solomon's hand rested gently on hers, grounding her. Afia, your courage and compassion have changed more than my life. They've reminded me why I even left my old world behind. You gave me hope again. Afia exhaled slowly, finally letting the realization settle in. The city around them faded for a moment. All that remained was the quiet truth between two lives forever altered. The day's chaos, the looming threats, the fear of loss, it all seemed distant now, replaced by the gentle power of human connection. Even the smallest acts of love can restore a lost soul. The smell of sizzling spices and fresh bread filled the air, but this time it wasn't coming from a cramped corner on the sidewalk. Afia stood in front of her very own restaurant, a warm, inviting place bathed in sunlight, with her mother's name proudly emblazoned above the door. The fold-out table and small cart that had once been her entire world now seemed like a distant memory, a humble beginning that had led to something far greater. Solomon stood beside her, a quiet smile playing on his lips as he watched the first customers arrive. "You did it," he said simply. "All you needed was a chance, and a little faith in people." Afia shook her head, her eyes scanning the bustling room. "No, we did it. You believed in my dream, but it's everyone here who's part of this story now." Her gaze fell on a young man in tattered clothes hesitating at the entrance. Without a second thought, she gestured him inside. "Come on in." Today, the community had started to gather, drawn not just by the food, but by the story behind it, the courage of a woman who had given everything to someone else for 30 days. Conversations hummed, laughter echoed, and the once empty restaurant pulsed with life and connection. Afia moved through the tables, smiling, serving, listening. Every nod of thanks, every sparkle of hope in someone's eyes reminded her of the ripple effect of kindness. Could a single act really change so many lives? She wondered, watching a small child tug at her mother's skirt, eager for a taste of the meals she now offered freely. She remembered the days when her stomach ached from hunger, when she had worried if her sacrifices meant anything. Now she realized that each last plate she gave away had built not only Solomon's trust but a foundation for this place, a beacon for anyone in need. Solomon leaned close, voice soft but sincere. "This is just the beginning. Afia, you've created more than a restaurant. You've built hope, a safe space, a reminder that goodness still exists." Afia's hand rested on her heart, her eyes glistening with tears. "I want everyone to feel welcome here, no matter who they are. Affordable meals, a free plate for someone who needs it, that's how my mother would have done it." She took a deep breath, letting the weight of the journey sink in, from fold-out table to this thriving haven. The city outside bustled with its usual rhythm, but inside, warmth and generosity reigned. Afia's dream had grown, but so had the legacy of her kindness, proof that even the smallest gestures can blossom into something lasting, something that changes a community. When we give from the heart, the world becomes a brighter place. Months had passed since Afia's restaurant opened, and life had settled into a rhythm filled with laughter, chatter, and the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals. The little community she had nurtured thrived, and she often reflected on the journey from her fold-out table to this place of warmth and hope. But on one ordinary afternoon, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance, Victor, the landlord who had once threatened to take everything from her. His suit was worn, his confident swagger replaced by hesitant steps, and his eyes carried a quiet shame that had never been there before. Afia paused, a mix of surprise and curiosity crossing her face. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath as Victor approached the counter, his voice barely above a whisper. I have nothing left. I don't know if you can forgive me." The room seemed to slow for Afia. She remembered the fear, the sleepless nights, the weight of wondering if her stand would survive. But she also remembered the 30 days of sacrifice, the quiet gratitude in Solomon's eyes, and the power of giving without expectation. She looked at Victor, and without hesitation, picked up the last plate she had prepared that day. Could kindness really extend even to someone who once tried to harm you? She wondered, her hand steady as she placed the plate in front of him. The smell of the food was rich and inviting, yet what lingered more was the unspoken gesture, a choice to rise above anger and fear. Victor looked at the plate, then at Afia, tears welling in his eyes. Why would you do this?" he asked, voice choked with emotion. Afia offered a small, serene smile. "Because no one is beyond the chance to change. We all stumble, we all fail, but kindness can remind us of what we're capable of." As he took a bite, the room felt lighter, the tension dissolving into warmth. Other patrons looked on, some whispering, some smiling, sensing that they were witnessing more than just a meal. They were witnessing the circle of generosity and forgiveness come full circle. Afia leaned back, her heart full. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has a ripple that can heal even the deepest wounds. She had given her last plate countless times before, but this one carried a new weight, the power of forgiveness, the proof that compassion could transform not just lives but hearts. In that moment, Afia understood the ultimate lesson. Generosity is strongest when it is offered without expectation, and love can triumph even over past wrongs. True strength lies in forgiving, and in feeding both the hungry and the heart.